hello and good evening, or, whatever the fuck time you're watching this. I mean, I don't know. I'm at my friend Robin's, and because they're completely redoing the facade of my apartment. And so after 120 days of COVID, self-containment, my apartment now has blue tarp draped over all the windows. So I'm going to be telling you my story from Robin's home with the aid of some, just... Okay, so this is supposed to be about somebody's life, right? So I thought, why not start with just a few fleeting monuments? Get us warmed up a little bit. Of course, one of the things about doing this piece, it's so different after Corona, is that I'm alone all the time. And so I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll do the whole thing about being the gay kid in Iowa. I'll do it like this, and I'll just, scotch tape a little weird character on it, and I could do that. And you could, stop watching. But I had, and this is every third person that does a monologue about being a gay kid, there's going to be the Barbie dolls or something to that effect. And there were Barbie doll weddings, and my dad had kind of a brainstorm that he might circumvent the Barbie doll weddings that I would stage for all the neighbor girls. And sometimes they were pretty Patti LaBelle-esque too, because aluminum foil was an easily available resource. And so sort of futuristic Barbie, epaulets and shadow, shoulders were a part of it. So Dad went out and bought me a G.I. Joe. And it was a big kind of a G.I. Joe set. It came with a tank. But one of the toys that was one of our favorites, it was right up there with Incredible Edibles, which is where you put this highly toxic plastic goo in a little baker, and you made little edible fluorescent pink roaches and spiders, and we just gobbled them down like no tomorrow. And that toy was outlawed later, of course. But the other toy that was outlawed was called Vacuform. And Vacuform was really an industrial strength toy that had a little frame that you put your little piece of, again, highly toxic plastic on, and then you could put, you could grab your mom's ring, or you could grab something else that you would never want to put that plastic, and then kind of just, it had this intense heat, and then you just, made a mold of whatever it was. And so one of the things that we had learned, and we were good kids. I mean, we gave rides in the dryer. That was like our really bad thing. And that ended when one of the next door neighbor kids that should have never got in and gone for a dryer ride. And of course, we'd never turn the heat on because we knew that was not good. But the dryer rides were, it was just, it was fantastic. It was everything we lived for. It was almost as good as chasing the DDT trucks. But little Bryn threw up in the dryer, and so that made a horrible end to that little activity. But the Vacuforms, we learned a very interesting technique. We learned that if you took a butter knife and you close the lid and put the butter knife inside the Vacuform, the butter knife would get bright red. But you knew when it was bright red, you should not touch the bright red butter knife. But you could take the bright red butter knife and you could put it on other plastic toys, and it would melt the plastic. And so within an hour and a half after the G.I. Joe tank arrived, I had taken the G.I. Joe tank and scalloped it with the red butter knife and made it look like a leaf-covered prom float. And so then it was Barbie and Ken at the homecoming parade float. And so I remember Dad came in and just kind of went, yeah, okay. That was the end of that. But I don't know, you know, for the gay kid traumas, I was in a beautiful little town, and I was, you know, ridiculously fat kid. I lived on else's. If you are elderly, you'll know that. And so we had, what was I going to say? We had, ruffles have ridges. And the other kids would always, you know, I'd be the last one polled to be on the crab soccer team or, you know, whatever. But my friends are always like really sweet about it. They're always like, well, Jamie, just remember that, you know, this is not, we just don't want our team to lose. But after school, let's get together and eat potato chips and watch cartoons. So it was like, I was never particularly like, oh, okay, it made sense. I mean, she married a young dentist, but little did she know that my dad would be, among his favorite patients were Amish. And so my mom was forever saying things like, oh, I suppose you're going to stay out all night doing a root canal for 2 dozen eggs. And we never had money, though, because of that. And I sort of think it's amazing that my dad had that way of seeing the world. So, needless to say, Bill and I didn't last very long on Christopher Street. But good things came out of it. I met Jeannie, and Jeannie and I had a wonderful several years together. We both looked at each other one day and said that we came to the realization that we were both into older men. So that was, but Mom did come to visit while Jeannie and I were living together and found Jeannie's shoes under my bed and said, what are these shoes doing here? And my friend Sebastian said, oh, well, because Jeannie lives here. And Mom, who was a little bit drunk on Tom Collins from the Amtrak from DC, ran out into the West Village with me chasing her as she was ranting, I can't believe you're living in sin with a woman. You're living in sin with a woman. And of course, that was some, needless to say, some fascinating foreshadowing to a time my mom and I would have a different discussion. What came, of course, was a wonderful relationship with somebody I met, and Bob got sick, and David, my college roommate, was the first to go, and then the avalanche began. And Michael Levin, my dear beloved Michael, was going. And the hospital runs were daily, and this new thing of ACT UP was starting, and we were doing what we could. And, you know, and during all of this, Mom never came to see any of my plays, and she never came to see, you know, when I worked on Rent, she never saw, you know, it's just like, just didn't happen. But my brother invited her to some wrestling thing in New Jersey, and so she showed up. And so it came to blows. And the morning that she was leaving the city, she was staying at the Hyatt Regency on 42nd Street, and I met her in the lobby, and it slowly escalated. And I said, you know, Mom, I'm going to the hospital every day, and Bob, who gave you that beautiful silk bouquet that is the center of your living room in Iowa, is in terrible shape. And she said, well, I just don't know why you're spending so much time with those homosexuals. And I said, you know, Mom, I think we know where this is going. And she goes, well, I don't know where it's going at all. And I said, Mom, this is that moment. I have to, you know, either we're friends now or we're not. because I'm in uncharted territory. I am seeing things that no human being should see. And she said, well, then you just need to not associate with them. And I said, Mom? And she said, I don't want to hear another word. And I said, Mom, you know the answer to this question. And she said, no, I do not know the answer to this question. I do not want to hear it. And I said, Mom, you have to hear it now, or we're done either way. And she said, well, okay, so, and I said, and so you know the answer, I'm a homosexual. And she said, yes, and you are dead to me. You are dead to me. And she got up, and walked away. And I guess one of the reasons that this story, matters or something, is that just like my mom, who a generation earlier brought her black college roommate home, and her parents forbade her to come back home for an unknown period of time, and obviously must have embarrassed the living daylights out of the young Chicago student living in and going to a Northeast Iowa college. It amazes me how little we learn from these things, how little Mom learned from what had happened to her. And I don't know that a generation of people that didn't go through this, having your parents tell you you're dead to them. It happens around the world right this minute. But I mourned Mom for some time, but I left that hotel and I walked to St. Patrick's Cathedral, where that morning ACT UP was responding to the current Cardinal O'Connor, who was refusing to teach safe sex, which of course would have saved who knows how many lives, as this brigade was opening with the epidemic globally. And Tom Keene broke the communion wafer. Those of us who were raised Catholic, or in my case, half Catholic, were not entering this in a lighthearted manner. It was a big deal for me to flagellate myself on the floor of prostrate myself on the floor of the cathedral. And I remember how hard I was crying there. Face down or face up, I don't remember. I think face up. But what had just happened with my mom felt like a continuation of what was happening in this cathedral. And that was it for Mom. And for 10 years, a few attempts were made by me. My brother tried to negotiate a couple. And then one day the phone call came. And my brother was terribly shaken. And he said, Mom's done. And I, of course, knew that she had finally perfected her long-time hobby as a suicidist. She went out in the garage and she turned the car on and kept the garage door closed. So I got on the next plane to Iowa, and soon I was in the Parkview Hotel. I went to the Parkview Motel because I knew that it was too much stress for me to stay with my brother and his family.
Suitcase is the suitcase that my mom
The Parkview Motel has no park and no view,
beside the
but it
bed
did have Patsy.
when she
Patsy
went
was
into the garage, turned on the car,
and
took her own life.
I had gone to school in this
The
town for
suitcase
3
had a
years.
little sign on it that said, "To
But I knew
Jeannie."
her and she knew me, and so she immediately
And
agreed to me with, "Oh, Jeannie, I just want
I
to
haven't
so
opened the
sorry about
suitcase
your
for about
mom.
15
I'm
years,
so
but I thought to
what a
tell you about
pity." And,
the work
I
that
sent
I've
you a
been working
couple of
on.
copies of her
I
obituary.
thought it might be useful.
So, if you want
It
to
has
just,
paraphernalia
I thought you might
from the
like it.
mid-50s.
So
Some
I
of it's a little
numbly took the
stylish,
obituary
actually.
and I took it back to the little room.
It has the underwear that was by the man who I'm named after.
No one had
And
stayed
a
in
couple
for
of his underwear. It
probably
has
years.
love letters. It has my
And
baby book
I
from the
sat down
hospital.
and I pulled out the
It
obituary.
has
and
a
I
year and a
learned-
half
was
of
reminded
love
that
letters.
Mom
My mom
was
wrote
valedictorian.
to this man
She had loved to sing
who,
before she had her tonsils
eventually
out.
ditched her
Had
And
screwed up.
I learned that about. all
Although she
that
never really liked to sing that much at home.
sitting in my
She
mom's
liked like the
bedroom,
occasional
still
little
smelling of the
Joe
gasoline
Stafford
in
song,
the garage.
or, Mares
In
and
this
Goats
I
and
learned it from this
Dozy
diary.
Dozy,
I also
and that
learned,
sort of
interestingly
thing,
enough, some of my vegetarian tendencies
And-
from this diary. 2 years before my
So
birth, 2
I'm
years
reading
after
through the
my birth.
obituary, and
I learned also
get
that my
to the
nickname was
part
Butch.
that says that she married John Leo
And there's lots more.
a year
But-
after I was
But
born.
the point is, I don't plan on giving a tour of this
So my
suitcase.
first thought
But I had
was
three
about Oscar Wilde's
pretty
quote, which I love to
intense,
mangle, and I don't even know if Oscar Wilde
close
said it.
brushes with
but
death in the
I've
last year.
always said that when
And
bad things happen to people,
I
they
decided
suffer,
that
and when
it
bad
was
things
time
happen to
to
artists, they get the
stop
material
my
they need to share
cowardice
the universal
about this
experience of being
suitcase
human.
and begin
Whatever.
a saga of finding
But I
out
sat
my
there
DNA.
trembling, wondering what
So,
this meant, and
that's
I quickly grabbed my
kind of
phone
what the
and I
piece is
called my
about.
brother. I said,
Thanks. for
"There's a
your time.
what is this ridiculous typo
So
in the
this is
paper
where it starts.
about Dad and
I
Mom?"
mean, I guess this is where I
And,
start. This
my
is
brother
a
said, "Well,
Yellowstone
James,
Park
I thought you
tourist
knew
diary.
this." And I
My
said,
mom
"I did not know
kept
this.
this in a
And
suitcase that was right beside.
Why didn't you
her
tell?
bed.
Why didn't anyone?"
um,
And it turns
she
out
took her
everyone
life.
knew it but me.
But this was
So,
from a 12th grade, 17.
The funeral was rough.
in Iowa.
Several of Mom's good
And
friends
it's
finally
a 5-year
confided in me
diary,
how
so
guilty they felt
One
that
of the
they'd
things
never
that the
reached
5-year
out to tell
diary
me.
does, in addition to some
And
aspects
I went to the
of
house,
holidays,
and
it
the house
has
still smelled of gasoline.
information that's
And I went into Mom's bedroom, and beside her
And
bed, there was
then she
this
starts.
suitcase.
And so each year,
And
on
it had a
January
small
1st, or
piece of
1952,
card, a small
53,
index card on it that said
54,
Jamie.
the year I'm born, and 55. She
the
keeps
contents
an
of this
intense
suitcase
record.
were a cryptic history of my origins. There's the birth book, there's several. The first thing that greeted me was some of the underwear of the man whose name I carry. And I went through it all. The 4 years diary, the letters where she and the man that would jilt her after I was born referred to her darling little Butch. I learned that I was a vegetarian early on. I learned that I enjoyed a custard early on. I was cute when I smiled, so it says. So I got back home to New York, and friends were so beautiful. People knew that this was kind of a big ticket item. And so my beloved Barry and Theodora said, we're getting you out. We're whisking you away. We are getting you out. You're just like, tonight you got home. We're taking you out. And so I love them dearly. And I just said, okay. So just head across the park and meet us at the Met. And so I go across the park, totally, I'm still pretty zonked, obviously. And we go inside, and if you know the Metropolitan Museum of Art, it's got this auditorium where they do like early music concerts and occasional lectures and stuff. Well, Barry and Theodore, both being fabulous avant-gardians, know how much I love the work of Harry Partch. And his operas are rarely staged because one of the things that this mad genius did is that he made all his own musical instruments. They were all like these odd cobbled together things, and he had his own, notation systems and everything. So doing one of his pieces is a big deal. So they were doing one of his operas, and so we got great seats. Barry and Theodore were like, and we're like in, 4th row center, fantastic. And the thing begins, and the only thing that Barry and Theodore didn't fully think through was the subject matter of the opera that was performed. It was a little ditty called Aeschylus. And within about the first 10 minutes, the Greek chorus comes on stage, and in this sort of Schoenbergian 12-tonial singing, they come out with, "Oh, it's your mother, it is your mother, she's taken her life, she's taken her life, she's taken her life." And Barry and Theodora like grip me on either side. And I'm like going, you know, just like, okay. And it's just too bizarre for words. And of course, if you know where this story goes, you know that it's not long when the next chorus comes in. And the chorus comes in with, "He's not your father, he's not your father, he's not your father. And we three were totally, we were just like the nightmare tourists going to the wrong avant-garde theater piece. You know, like we were reduced to blithering. We are all just like bad fifth graders at a sex ed chat. We were just like, we were losing it. And I'm surprised they didn't ask us to leave because it just didn't stop. And of course, for me, it was like unbelievable good news in a perverse way. It was such release to just have this insanity unfold before us. But the love that I got from my extended family is something else that I hope, as I talk to you in this strange way, I hope you find that in yourself, and I hope you find that in the world around you. So I was really excited that my last name was Leo and that my grandma's name had been Galileo. And so I always thought, oh, well, you know, I'm related. And so near my dad died 10 years before my mom. And he was yelling at bugs in the garden. But he was growing my grandmother's Italian heirloom oxheart tomatoes that they brought from Italy in the 20s to this little tiny town that is, if you draw a straight line, everyone that knows me has heard this 100 times, but if you draw a straight line from Minneapolis to St. Louis and you draw a straight line from Chicago to Denver, you get this little town. And the railroads were there, several roundhouses were there, and several Italian families came right in the middle of all the Amish, right in the middle of all the Norwegians and Germans. And these Italian families had a complete culture unto themselves. And I have a couple of great Italian sauces to show for it. But Dad, I never understood him. He never understood me. We never liked each other. And I knew something was up, but I didn't know what was up. And after I waited a while, I started to spend more time in the suitcase, the prop suitcase, the Grapes of Wrath suitcase that Mom left by the bed. And as I was going through it, there was one envelope that didn't make any sense. There was a photo of a guy who looked an awful lot like me, unlike the James guy that I'm named after, who was kind of a dark, tall, kind of lean, athletic guy. This guy, his penmanship looked like mine. He wrote his name coming out of his pipe in smoke. He wrote comedy for the radio. Sorry, I didn't inherit anything from that, but that's another story. But the path to try to reach him was a slow one. And I waited a while because I needed to just figure out what was next. But I eventually talked to the radio station where my mom had worked with him, and where in her diary she had said, had a wonderful time with Andy. What a wonderful man. And this was shortly after the man, my namesake, she had said, I don't want to see Jim. I love him, but I don't want to see him anymore if he ever treats me like that again. So I got wishful, hoping that maybe there was something there, that maybe it turns out that the nice guy whose wife had died and would end up being my father. So I chased down, I couldn't find his name, but I found his brother, and I just saw a link that got me to him. So got an address in Wisconsin. I wrote him a letter, and I basically just said, my mom has died, and she's got some very fun poems and limericks that your brother wrote, and I've got a couple of photos of him if you'd like them. I was very clear. So no response. So I waited a couple weeks and I wrote again. And I just said, I wrote you a couple weeks ago and I just wanted to let you know that I've got some stuff. I wanted to be sure that the other letter didn't get lost or something. And nothing. So I waited a month or two. And then I just thought on a fluke. I thought, call him. And it's like, it's Saturday at 6:30. And I pick up the phone and I said, hi, my name is James and I wrote you a couple of letters. And he goes, yeah, I know all about you. And if you even think of trying to reach me again, I'll get the cops on you so faster, And I was like, I said, I just wanted to let you know about the... And he said, I don't care. You don't ever contact me again. Do you understand? Click. So I thought, okay. So I think that's as much of Midwesterners as I need to have in my life. I don't need to go further with this. And I was shaken by it. And so, but, so be it. And certainly, I'm after his money he was like a radio announcer. And so about a year and a half later, the phone rings. And a really warm voice says, hi, my name is Patty. And my dad was Andy. And I have sort of a sad thing to tell you. And that is that my Uncle Bob got a couple of letters from you. And I said, yes, I wrote him just to ask. And, well, Uncle Bob died about 2 weeks ago. And we were cleaning his house and we found these letters on his desk. And I just want you to know, I don't know if we're brother and sister or not, but I do know that my dad talked about your mom our whole lives growing up. And it's up to you. If you want to find out more, we can find out more. Dad died about a year ago, and he had a stroke and had been in bad shape for a while. But if you want to follow through on this, you can. And that brings me to last summer. I have let 20 years go by without following up on that. And who knows why we do or don't do things. But last summer had 3 events happen that have prompted me to want to find out. So the day I got thrown off the Bear dating website, I got a post from a face I didn't recognize, and he said, I bet you don't remember me. Well, I did remember Kevin. He was my first boyfriend's best friend. And when Bill Mendez and I moved from Baltimore to Christopher Street in 1977, Kevin became a close friend. And as things changed, Bill and I left after 4 years together, went separate ways, kept in touch off and on. And Kevin and I lost a Christmas card address, and then that was the end of that. And I had looked for Bill throughout the epidemic, wondering what became of him, and never saw a reference to him. And then as we started searching and using Google and, tried to look for him that way, never found anything on him. And so Kevin reaching out to me was kind of a pleasant surprise. And he immediately, once we connected, we started going to lectures together and rekindling a nice friendship. But neither of us knew what had happened to Bill, where he was. We had both looked for him. So I was getting ready to take a trip, and I was going to be going to meet my significant other emeritus, who I spent 25 years with. And we were getting ready to go to meet in Portugal. And then, as is our habit in this part of our lives, he would come back with me and stay several months with me in New York. Well, our dear friend Susan had a horrific cancer scare, and we're overjoyed that it's a happy ending. and she's in full remission. But at that time, I was about to get on a plane, and I had seen her through one round of chemo, and she had done very well with it. But by all accounts, the end of the second round was going to be brutal. So we got ourselves decided that we would touch base. She decided that since she's at NYU, that I'd meet her near there. Now, with significant other coming to stay with me, there was serious cleanup at my house necessary, and there was like a dimmer switch that needed to be replaced, or all hell would have broken loose once significant other emeritus arrived. And so I figured that I would leave my busy work schedule and I would head to Home Depot on 23rd Street, and then I would meet Susan for lunch somewhere kind of in the NYU area. So I was on a phone call with my boss, and you know, it's all hell is breaking loose every day of the week with work. And so in the middle of that call, I texted Susan, meet me at, and since I'm going to be seeing our Iranian significant other, why don't we do Persian? So quickly popped the address of the restaurant to her, and she said, perfect, sounds fantastic. So I finished my call, and I took the subway down to 23rd Street, and then I hopped a city bike to meet her. And the minute I got to the bike rack, I went, oh, for fuck's sake, told her the wrong Persian restaurant. I told her the one that's on the other side of town. And the whole point of meeting at this Persian restaurant was that it's pretty close to NYU, and it'd be easy for her to walk 2 blocks and then take the bus up to Grand Central, where she would head home to her home in Westchester. So I quickly called her, texted her and said, oh fuck, I'm so sorry, wrong. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm terribly sorry. I'm stuck on a bus and I'm at Lexington. And I said, get off the bus. And she said, oh, okay. I texted her the new address. I cycled there. We had a wonderful lunch at the Persian restaurant I had intended her to go to in the first place. And when we were done, I walked her to 23rd Street. She got on the bus, and I walked back. And as I walked back, I suddenly thought, you know, I'm going to take a different route back I got to go to Home Depot, so I'll just walk. And I walked thinking, you know, I haven't been by the little church of the Transfiguration, the little church around the corner, for many, many years. And when I used to do architectural walking tours of the city, that was a place I just, for some reason, never got really inside there. I never sort of did the Roosevelt Midtown tour, architecturally or whatever. And so I was walking by there, and it was early spring, so it's cool, but I saw there were several people sitting in the courtyard. And then I saw the weirdest thing imaginable. When was the last time you saw a church open in New York City on a weekday? But I saw the doors are open, and I thought, well, I want to go see what, you know, it's going to be a lovely Episcopalian woodwork, low ceilings, some nice, you know, blonde stained glass windows. And I thought, let's just poke in for a second, because you're already buried alive with work, and you're trying to get on a plane. It's like, and you've had a nice lunch with Susan, so it's like, I head in there, and I'm looking at all the architecture, really enjoying it all, of course, and I see this little postcard on the, you know, kind of, there's like a platform at the back of the chapel. And it's really this beautiful postcard. It's like pink and lemon colored flowers. And it says, antique German, early German song concert this Friday night. And I'm like, well, that's out of the picture, because I got to go see Chris's new choreography that night, so that's not going to happen. But I think, well, this is really kind of beautiful, and something I would really kind of find interesting to go to. So I put the card down, and I'm like, I'm purging. I'm 60, you know, I'm just about to turn 66. I'm not going to collect more crap. So I leave the postcard. And right as I'm leaving the church, I look at one of those entrance areas where they always have that, you know, the church does all of its good programs to colonize the world and so forth. And I see a big blow up of that same poster with the yellow and pink flowers. And right under it, I see this. And it's Bill Mendez, my first boyfriend, who I haven't seen in 30 years. Doesn't look like the Bill I knew, but I still know those eyes. And I immediately respond to the notice, and I learn that Bill has been a leader at Sage, doing work as social work. And when I first met Bill, he was a social worker, but unfortunately he became a clothes horse along the way, and worked at Gimbel's and Bloomingdale's for a while. I sent some photos to their to the service that they were planning for him. He had died 3 days before I saw the flyer. And I thought, how close, how very close. My first call was to Kevin. And Kevin thought, well, it was as kind of set back at this, that we just missed him by 3 days. And needless to say, 2 weeks later, I was telling stories about Bill and Christopher Street at his packed memorial service.
Oh, and at his service, they said that Bill abjectly hated social media.
Okay, so the second death is a fast-moving death. And it started with great fun. I went with my friends Fussy and Fanny and Nina and Sonia, and we made, 200 fruit kebabs, 200 or so. And it was part of their wonderful street fair in their beautiful Brooklyn neighborhood. And on the way back, Nina and I had spotted on Fulton Avenue, which is a shopping area that was created in the late 80s and is a pedestrian mall in Brooklyn. And we stopped, we had seen something that we wanted to see. It was like a store that was completely filled floor to ceiling with fluorescent dresses and scarves and garments and stuff. And so, you never have enough blacklight friendly wardrobe pieces. So we hopped off the bus and we're on the pedestrian mall, and the last thing I would have seen before my death was this. Because that's what I looked up to as we stepped out from beyond a bus. And the bus was parked, and I was easily 30 seconds of an inch from the multi-ton 40-mile-an-hour bus going the wrong way up the one-way bus road. And I flung my arm out, which happened, and my thought was, I'm living, I don't know what I thought, it doesn't matter what I thought, but I flung my arm out, and Nina and I both stood there, and as we stood there trembling, the bus long gone, it was an older shopping woman behind us, I think she was Jamaica, and she started weeping. And she just said, "Oh, you're so lucky. Oh, you're so lucky." And just to give you an idea how traumatized I was, we went into the store with fabulous Dayglow stuff. I didn't buy a thing. I just stood there going, I didn't die just now. I didn't die. And that's kind of one of the morals of this whole story, that you always hear about, like, and I when I was doing my art tours around the world, I would always have somebody you'd see them on the bus or the group, and there's always like this one person who was just radiant. And then we'd have drinks later or something, and his wife would go, Stanley just survived a heart attack, and it's changed him. It's completely changed him. But I try to keep remembering throughout the whole COVID, as that disaster keeps unfolding, friends have heard me say again and again, just like the minute I start to get impatient with being in my little cell block, I am very reminded that I am not a refugee in Yemen. But did it change me? Not enough. Or maybe it did. Anyway, we have one more story.
So, I don't quite understand it either, but every year, my ex of 25 years comes and lives with me. And it's always a very amicable situation. We share a lot of friends and family, and we always have a really great time. And all of a sudden, I got a phone call. And it was a woman's voice, sweet young person. She said, "Hi, this is Tiffany," and it was his phone. And I thought, "Oh, that's weird." And she said, "Well, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but your friend asked me to call you, and he's very, very, very sick." And I went, "What?" And she said, he's collapsed, and they're putting him onto an ambulance." And I'm like, what? And she said, "Well, he was in the park, and he was throwing up very much, and some people tried to help him." And I just thought, okay, fucking heart attack or stroke, or I don't know what the fuck. So I quickly started running around the house, and I grabbed all of his heart medicines, and I grabbed a Kitty Carlisle mask, and I said to her, where are they taking him?" She goes, "Well, I don't know. I think they're taking him to, I think it's called Northwest Hospital." I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And she goes, "Well, it's at 13th Street and 7th Avenue. And I thought, okay, it's the old St. Vincent's thing. And where are you? She goes, we're at 23rd Street and the Chelsea Piers." And I'm like, "Okay, please, if you could tell him, if you don't mind, just tell him I'm a few stops away on the subway, and I'll hurry, and I'll be there in just a minute." So I race out the door. My heart is pounding. My life is passing before my eyes. And I get down, and I hurry to the emergency entrance on 12th Street by the giant AIDS memorial, which I call the car wash, which gets me in trouble. And I race up to the guy, and I said, what have you seen an older foreign gentleman come in? And he goes, "Nah, there hasn't been anybody." And I said, "Well, there hasn't been an ambulance because they were only about 10 blocks away from here, and they were coming here." He goes, "No, there hasn't been an ambulance." And I'm just like, "Okay, sir, it's a family member. I don't know. I mean, please, I need your help." And he goes, "Well, I mean, a couple came in about 10 minutes ago." And I said, "Okay, so maybe Tiffany called somebody else, and maybe another good friend showed up quickly. So you don't have a tracking? You don't have a, no, they don't give me anything right away." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "So we'll go to the front desk, check the front desk." So I'm like, okay. So I head to the front desk, and right as I turn to the front desk, my phone beeps, and it's his phone again. And it says, "This is somebody's name with the NYFND, or the New York Fire Department medics. And because of his condition, we are having to take him to NYU on 32nd and 1st Avenue." So I'm like, oh, perfect. Now I'm in the wrong part of town, so he'll obviously be dead by the time I get there. So I decide I'm not going to torture myself to get into a taxi cab and die that 1,000 deaths in crosstown traffic. So I hop on a city bike, and I decide also that I'm not going to do Wicked Witch of the West on the city bike and get myself killed getting there. But I just at least I can get myself there and be in control of it. So I get across town, I head right to the ambulance area. And of course, the same thing with the ambulance area there. There's a bunch of ambulances, and I go ambulance to ambulance, and there's nobody in any of the ambulances, and there's no drivers around. And so I head inside, and I see the front check-in desk. And I go to the front second desk, and there's an older white woman with blonde hair, and older, probably half my age, and she's sitting there. And I go up to her and I go, "Excuse me, my best friend is collapsed, has been just brought in." And she said, if you're seeing somebody that's going into the emergency room, you need to talk to security." And so I'm like, wow, thanks for the great hospitality, lady. I didn't say that. I head over to who is clearly the brother of the guy at the St. Vincent's gig. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, a friend has come in." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "Well," I said, his name is," and he goes, "What? What are you saying?" And I said, "It's a foreign name." And he, I realized I can't say his name. It's a center part of this whole story. But the guy can't pronounce his name. And I'm going like, I'm saying it again. And he's like, can't get it. And he's going, I was like, "What is it, Alan?" And I said, "No, it's not Alan." I said, "Please, it's just, I'm spelling it for you." And he goes, I don't see it in here. And I said, "Okay, sir, I don't know what to do. I don't know who else to ask. The front reception lady told me I had to come to you." And right then, this older, very big, lumbering, homeless man came up, and he starts going, I'm sick. I need a doctor now." And the guy goes, "You just wait in line. You're going to get a doctor." And he goes, "No, I need a doctor now." And he proceeds to wander into the waiting room, which of course is far more interesting to the guard than my saga. So he gets up, just walks away from me, and starts following into the altercation that ensues between him and the homeless man. And so gets him back out, seats him down again, comes back, and I can hardly breathe. I'm so freaked out. And I just said, "Please, sir, I'm really begging at the bottom of my heart. I don't know what else to ask you. I don't know what to do." And he said, "If they just checked in, they don't always give me the list. We got to go to the reception." So he gets up, and we walk over to the lady that had growled at me, and comes, and he goes, "This guy's looking for his family member that's been checked into the hospital." And I said his name, and she goes, "Oh, Kaufman 52. I'm like, wow. So I said, "Well, how do I get to Kaufman?" She goes, "Don't even ask me." She goes, "You just keep going and go in that entrance and just keep asking people as you go, because it's complicated." Of course, this is like the NY Bellevue prison complex. I don't know what it's insanity. And so I get in there, and of course, one disgruntled security person after another goes, "Yeah, Kaufman this way, Kaufman this way, Kaufman this way, Kaufman this way." And so I walk building to building, I walk, and then finally I come to one end. Suddenly it's a ward, but it's not Kaufman. And I ask the guard, "Well, is this Kaufman?" She goes, "No, you got to walk through the ward. Just walk straight through, and you'll see at the end of the sign." So I go in, and I walk in, and I am suddenly in. I mean, it's not Atlanta from Gone with the Wind, but it's intense. It's the measles ward of the Orthodox Brooklyn Jewish outbreak. And so it's all these people on stretchers. And I'm literally 3 feet away from two sides of an aisle of people in their stretchers covered with boxes. And I'm just like, "Oh, this is great. Breathe deep, And so I get to the end of that. I turn, and there's a guard sitting there. And I said, "Kaufman 52. And she goes, "You don't read signs?" And of course, it's right over her head to the left. I walk in. The second I open the door of this ward, I see at the end of the long room, there's Socrates. There he is. He's draped. His shirt is open. He's got stuff, they've put some monitors on him. He's out. He's dressed. He's kind of half draped in a blanket. I can't believe my eyes. And I walk past all the stalls of all the other sick people, and I get up to the end, and I go, you on the forehead, and I go, "What's happened to you?" And he goes, and I'm just like, okay, so it's the big stroke. I mean, I don't know what to assume. It's the big something. And I turn, and nearby, there's a sort of pithy to pissy sort of metrosexualist kind of or medic or orderly. And I turn to him and I go, "So, sir, do you have any idea what's happened to my friend?" And he goes, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "I'm family, okay, 25 years. And he goes, "Oh, don't worry about your friend. He's going to be just fine." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Edibles." And of course, I just burst into laughter. He's, of course, raided my freezer, where I keep the cannabis samples from my job, where he has clearly not read the instructions about what portion of the organic artisan cannabis brownie he should eat.
So, I got my test back from 23andMe. And I don't have any idea who my father is. I did learn a couple of fun facts related to Henry VIII. So probably you are too. But the one that I really liked, and again, no special lottery, apparently it happens to plenty of people, but it made me feel like it was worth my $125 to learn that not only am I a little bit Portuguese, and a lot of Irish, and some Scandinavian, but I also have my genetic tracing go back all the way to the first African matriarch, 31,000 generations ago. And that was worth the price of admission. Still don't know who my dad is. But I didn't go bald. I haven't had a stroke. I think I'll get by. Okay, so as a special bonus, since you stayed through the whole thing, these are some important free funeral tips. So, first of all, have a pre-funeral. Have a funeral while you're still alive. Have a big party. And encourage people to, it's a roast. Have people there who will dish you to your face. So that's one. Two, give it a break. Yes, one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen is in a Jewish funeral when the trembling wife could barely push the shovel because the profundity of it is so moving and beautiful. But where I grew up, it was all astroturf and it couldn't have been creepier. Have a memorial when you can celebrate the person. Better yet, do it before they die. Okay, we got that out of the way. Food is important, but don't trap people in some restaurant. It's got to be a buffet. I mean, assuming that we can ever actually have buffets in the same room together after COVID. But anyway. And the other thing is, and I did this with my grandma and it worked wonderfully, if you are really trapped and have to deal with a funeral home, have a pie social. I rounded up all my grandma's recipes and had this local baker bake them, and my grandmother's friends were overjoyed. And everybody had pie. It was totally wonderful. And that's the other thing about funeral homes is make sure you control the soundtrack, because they might be giants at mine. Okay. And then the other thing is that, legislate, because there's, even if you have yourself incinerated, all of the mercury, we're filled with plastic, we're filled with toxins, and all of that, if you're cremated, off it goes. So it's like, get a mushroom bag. And there's a link right here. Google it. But there's a link where you can find out, somebody did a TED Talk about mushroom bags. And the mushrooms, basically, they plant you and they eat you, and then you, help, as opposed to just, be this dead grave site that no one can ever do anything but mow. Anyway, I think that rounds it up. And have a great life.
This was supposed to be a performance of me just standing and talking, basically, with some slides, maybe, backdrops. And then all of a sudden, I'm gonna make a movie.
Sound queer and funny to your ear, a little bit jumbled and jivey. Sing mares eat oats and does eat oats, and little lambs eat ivy.